Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Hello. This is episode 23 of Driven. It's an informational episode on movement planning. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is, but know that this builds upon a lot of our other informational episodes to date. In particular, episode 19 on autonomous navigation, we talked about path planning and how to use the path generated to kind of self-navigate down the road. So that's key here. Because movement planning wouldn't be movement planning without movement of the vehicle, i.e. the vehicle is self-navigating down a road along a path. And then also episode 22 on sensor fusion and some of the episodes before that, but sensor fusion talked about how the different sensors are used to detect physical objects and fuse those objects in an object pool that defines all of the things that are about the vehicle that it should be concerned with, be it pedestrians, other cars, deer, or what have you that may be on the road ahead or on the road on the side of the vehicle. So all of that is important, as now that we know that there are objects out there, we have a path ahead of us that we're traveling to get to our destination. We have to actually react to these objects in some way. We talked about object detection and perception, and then the fusion of those objects, but there's also the object avoidance aspect of all this. Sometimes they refer to it as ODOA, object detection, object avoidance, or ODA. I've seen that, object detective avoidance. I think they leave out the O. But we do have to react or avoid objects, however you want to refer to it, that are in the path of the vehicle, right? And do something to avoid collisions along the way. And so a movement plan is needed. That is formulating a plan for what movements that the vehicle should take to get to its end destination safely, avoid obstacles, navigate around things, passing, what have you. So this is a key aspect of autonomous behavior, maybe probably the heart in some perspectives as to what the autonomous vehicle needs to do, because this is where it's making all those intelligent decisions as to how to make its way in the world without colliding with things. And so movement plans are really comprised of a number of maneuvers. There's a number of maneuvers that the vehicle can engage that we might distinguish from one another, such as passing or pacing, I should say, behind another vehicle. Some might call it following, or adaptive cruise control, where we see a vehicle in front of us, we come up to it because it's in our path, it's in our lane, and now we want to maintain some safe braking distance behind it. So we follow behind the vehicle. And then if we're in stop and go traffic, it might get a little closer, but it's still keeping a safe distance behind the vehicle ahead. And then as warranted, there may be a maneuver that kicks in if there's a sudden object like a deer or something that sort of comes in front of the vehicle, or the vehicle in front of you, your vehicle is suddenly applying the brakes. We have a forward collision avoidance maneuver or engagement that has to take place such that it can avoid this collision with maybe more of an emergency level of braking, as opposed to the kind of braking that's associated with just adaptive cruise control or following behind another vehicle. Then if we're getting impatient, or if it's warranted, the vehicle in front of us is moving too slow, or it's just warranted under a certain situation, the vehicle can engage in a passing maneuver, right? So that's now another distinct maneuver. It's not just following behind a vehicle in front of it, it's now engaged in a situation where it's looking behind it and then looking ahead of it and determining that it can pass this vehicle that's in front of it. Other sort of situations, you come up to a stop sign, you have to slow down the vehicle so that it stops at the stop sign, and then as it navigates through the intersection, handle all the intersection logic that's associated with just doing that, looking down other lanes of travel, making sure that you can proceed into the intersection and then through the intersection safely, right, to get to the other side of the connecting roads that you're trying to drive on through the intersection. And then other kinds of maneuvers like parking, parallel parking, just pulling into a parking space head on or backing into a parking spot. There's a whole range of maneuvers that an autonomous vehicle will engage in along the way, and this is really, again, at the heart of the behavioral engine, or the what we might call the movement planner, again, that is determining what the vehicle should do at any point in time based on where it's trying to get to and the objects and obstacles in and around its environment, right, to navigate around them. So a number of maneuvers that can be engaged at any point in time. And so we break these down into discrete maneuvers, but without these maneuvers don't operate without any sort of context or worldly knowledge, as we've just discussed. It has to know what its position is, of course, on the path, what its heading and orientation is. It has to know its actual path. It has to have access to its path such that it can know that there's a lane maybe to the left of me that I can actually travel on, and I won't be traveling off of the road. So that's getting access to not just path, but mapping information. And also having access to that pool of objects that are around the vehicle, so it can know where they are relative to the vehicle and navigate and react appropriately, right? And then perhaps having some direct access or through some intermediaries to the mobility platform for controlling steering, brake, throttle, the gear that you're in. If you're in a parking maneuver, you're going to be shifting gears, so forth and so on. So it has to have some access to the controls as well as the sensory information and the route and map information that has been created by some of the other aspects of the autonomous vehicle software and platform that we've talked about already in many regards in earlier episodes. So this kind of is the glue that ties a lot of that conversation that we previously talked about together. And the movement plan has to have this context in order to make good decisions as to what movements it should engage. Now, any particular individual maneuver has to have some series of conditions, situations that trigger it to engage and become active, right? You don't want to just be driving down the road and suddenly go into a parking maneuver, right? Something has to trigger that parking maneuver. So you're going to be navigating through a parking lot, and you have an end destination that happens to be a parking spot. It may be that your distance to that parking position that you're scheduled to enter into triggers a parking maneuver. So if it's a parallel parking maneuver, for example, you may be pulling up alongside the vehicle or alongside the parking spot where there may be other vehicles in front of you or behind you, and hopefully not in the spot, but you have to detect that as well, and then parking into the parking spot. But something has to trigger that. In this case, it might be how far you are to an actual parking spot. In the case of a forward collision avoidance maneuver that might trigger emergency braking, it's going to be a sudden object that is in front of you in the road, and now your distance to that object and your speed, current speed, are such that you have to apply a more aggressive level of braking. So there's different triggers for different types of maneuvers, but nevertheless, there has to be something that triggers a maneuver to engage. Similarly, when you're approaching an intersection, as you get close to that intersection, you're going to trigger the steps to take that you might take through to stop at a stop sign that is at that intersection, or begin to look at a traffic light if it's a signalized intersection, and you're navigating through the intersection based on the state of the traffic light. So something has to trigger the maneuvers. It may often be the distance to some aspect that would trigger the maneuver: the distance to the stop sign, the distance to the traffic light, the distance to the parking spot, or it just might be that there is an object in front of you within a certain range that should trigger an emergency braking maneuver, for example. So different triggers for different maneuvers, but nevertheless, all maneuvers have triggers, and all maneuvers typically have steps. A maneuver just isn't usually just I'm going to just do this and be done, right? Although there are some maneuvers that have a single step, but very often maneuvers have sequences to go through to complete the maneuver. The parking spot is a perfect example where the maneuver will get triggered that you're a certain distance away from this parallel parking position. And so now you're going to go through a number of steps where you might slow down. That might be one step until you stop just ahead of the parking spot parallel to you. That may be another step. Now you're going to put the vehicle into reverse. That may be a step in and of itself. And then you're going to start to back into the position as you angle your wheels, and then stop before you hit a vehicle behind you, or when you're in a good spot in the parking spot. That may be another step. And then straightening out the wheels and pulling forward and aligning into the parking spot. That may be another step. And then stopping. That may be the final step, right? So there's a number of steps that one takes as you engage in these maneuvers. For an emergency braking maneuver, it might just be I see an object out front and I'm just going to apply I calculate my safe braking distance. I'm going to apply the brake at a certain level to stop at a certain decel rate before I collide with that object in front. And that may be the maneuver. Now, that may be the maneuver, interesting enough, in just a regular car, or maybe even like a robotaxi, but it may not be what you do in a bus or a shuttle, where you might have people standing up and holding on to railings or handles that are attached to the ceiling or up high on the bus. Because they're standing in the bus, the maneuver might actually be there's something in front of the bus or something in front of the shuttle. And the first step is I'm going to sound an alert to let people know that the bus is about to stop, and I brake at a certain level. And then there might be a subsequent step where you're braking a little bit more. These are things that some colleagues of mine have sort of discussed in the past that might be appropriate for certain autonomous maneuvers inside of buses and shuttles that are warranted, versus just slamming on the brakes where you might have people standing in those types of vehicles. So different configurations of maneuvers for different vehicular applications. But all of these engage in a sequence of steps, as we just discussed, right? So there's a sequence of steps that any maneuver must step through before it successfully completes its maneuver state. And sort of evaluating whether or not to get into a particular maneuver, i.e. the maneuver triggers, but also evaluating whether you should transition to each step along the way. You're going to be evaluating certain conditions, typically that come from sensor information from the environment, or maybe from your map information, that determine whether or not you should proceed to the next step in the sequence of steps for that maneuver. So, for example, the parallel parking maneuver, you might determine one parameterized condition might be, what have I stopped yet? Is my speed 0, right? So that I can know to go into the next step. Or has the vehicle transitioned to reverse yet? Before I know I can proceed to start actually backing up the vehicle, right? So there's a number of conditions determining what your current Has the speed reached a certain level? Has my braking, has my deceleration rate reached a certain level, or has my acceleration rate reached a certain level? Is my steering angle to a certain point? There's all kinds of um, things that you can query with respect to the state of the vehicle, but also the state of the objects around you. Is there, an object in front of me? Is there an object blocking my position to the right of me in this spot that I want to parallel park into? Um, these are all conditions that can be evaluated and captured in such a way and are used as part of the maneuver sequencing logic to determine if you can transition to the next step. Now, there may be one or more parameterized conditions in evaluating whether or not you're proceeding to the next step in the maneuver. And it may be that the rule is that if any one of those conditions evaluates to true, then I'm going to proceed to the next step. Or maybe I want all of them to evaluate to true. So there's like sort of the and the or of all these parameterized conditions. Or you might have more complex evaluation expressions based on the specific conditions to determine whether or not you transition to the next step. Or if you're going to just sort of abort and halt, the maneuver altogether, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but suffice it to say that there's all these parameterized, conditions or situations that you're evaluating, and there's some evaluation expression. It might be a really simple Boolean and or of all the conditions, or it might be something more, complicated to determine if you're going to proceed to the next step or even to a different, branch of the maneuver logic, right? So, but after that decision is made and as a step is engaged, there's one or more actions that will be taken, right? So an action in that parallel parking maneuver might be to decel at a certain rate. That might be an action. It might be to put the vehicle into reverse, put it into forward, put it into park. So there's shift actions. Anything that's really controlling steering, brake, and throttle, right, might constitute as an action. Steer the vehicle to a certain angle and waypoint that you're trying to hit, or by a certain degree along the way, and so these are all actions that are taken during each step of these maneuvers, right? If it's forward collision avoidance, you might be just sort of self-navigating in your lane as usual, and it might only be that you're going to engage in a forward deceleration action event, right? And so that may be the singular action that you engage based on the calculation of safe braking distance and how fast you should be decelerating at any point along the way, right? That, of course, can be dynamically updated based on evaluation of other conditions, but again, during each step of the way in these maneuvers, you're going to engage in another number of actions. So for each maneuver, you have a number of steps that you take. You're going to have parameterized conditions that are one or more that are going to determine whether or not you move to the next step in the sequence of steps for that maneuver, and then each step is going to engage in one or more actions along the way. An action may also be sounding an alarm, giving a warning to the driver or to the passengers in the vehicle. So actions can be, of course, a wide variety of things that help you realize these maneuvers. And by setting up these situations in this way, you can actually have trainable actions. You can using things like neural networks and other types of machine learning methodologies, where you're training the system as to what constitutes the right combination of parameterized conditions to even trigger a maneuver or to trigger the steps along the way in the maneuver, the actions that should be taking, the configurable variables that drive the actions, the perhaps braking levels or what have you, It gets a little dicey in my opinion, when you start to employ machine learning methods in controlling the behavior of the vehicle. Companies are out there doing it, but at the end of the day, and as we'll talk about not in an upcoming episode of, where we dive a little deeper into machine learning for autonomy, um, the ability to make a deterministic decision as to whether or not these actions and things should be taken becomes compromised, because these are more probabilistic situations when it comes to machine learning, and you can't know, yea verily, that it's doing the right thing at the right time. And certainly if there's an issue, it's very hard to kind of go back and figure out, or it can be difficult to figure out what caused that situation, because you're just looking at a bunch of numbers in a neural network weight matrix, right? If that's your method for determining what went wrong. But and that might be a little bit hyperbola, but it's nevertheless a true fact that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to make deterministic decisions along the way. So what I'm talking about here, using neural networks, what I'm talking about here is just sort of the structure, the general structure, and the general methodology by which an autonomous vehicle can make more deterministic decisions as to what maneuvers it should engage, when it should engage them, and the steps that it should take, and then the conditions that trigger each step and the actions along the way. Now, if you have one or more maneuvers at any one point in time that may be triggered, you're going to have some method of arbitration. And so as part of the movement planning process, you may have two or three or more than one maneuver triggered and active at any point in time. And it may be that you can only allow one versus the other. And this is where prioritization, you might call it subsumption architectures, come into place, where you, of course, choose the most restrictive or the most safe maneuver or path to take. So if you're traveling in a forward direction and pacing behind another vehicle, and if that's a maneuver adaptive cruise control, obviously if something jumps in front of the vehicle, you're not going to continue that pacing maneuver. You're going to give priority to some forward collision avoidance maneuver, if architected as such, to trigger an emergency braking situation and sort of disengage the adaptive cruise control maneuver, at least for the time being, until the emergency braking situation completes and that object is out of the way, right? And you can now proceed as normal. So arbitration of maneuvers is really important, and some of the logic in determining which maneuvers take priority it can be simple. It can be just that you rank prioritize maneuvers in terms of their safety, or you use some of these parameterized conditions and evaluation methodologies to make some decisions as to which maneuver should be given the highest priority at any point in time. So that's in a nutshell, this is how movement planning can work in an autonomous vehicle. It's a key part of any autonomous vehicle situation where you're going to make certain decisions as to what the vehicle should do based on the objects in its environment, the path that it's traveling in, and determining if it can get to its end destination safely, and of course engaging in the maneuvers like parking and pulling over to the side of the road to pick people up if it's a bus, or backing into a docking bay if it's like a tractor trailer, navigating through intersections, be they intersections with stop signs, yield signs, traffic lights, all kinds of situations, passing maneuvers, anything that you and I would do in traveling from point A to point B in the operational design domain in which this autonomous vehicle is operating. Those constitute all the maneuvers that one has to kind of consider and then engage along the way to make the vehicle travel safely to its end destination. So that's movement planning. I hope you've found this episode useful. We'll dive deeper in subsequent episodes into maybe specific maneuvers. And we want to talk, like I said before, a little bit about machine learning soon as it applies to just autonomy in general, but also to driving the vehicle and the movement planning behavioral engine of these systems. So thanks very much. See you next time. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.